Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network, and today's topic is cost versus value. Oftentimes, when we make financial decisions, we look just at dollars and cents without looking at actual value. And we get to have a closer look at that whole decision-making process this morning. Good morning, Rosalind. Great to have you here with us this morning. We're looking at cost versus value, but before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating this brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. Now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the pressure, the friction, the temperature. And when you stop, all the tickling and tingling, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So it's great to be here with you. And today we're talking about cost versus value. So we often look at things just in terms of dollars and cents. So when we look at a service, we'll just dismiss it, perhaps because of the price, or we will buy something because we can afford it, even though the value might not be aligned with the actual price of it. And so I am inviting you to take a look at how you make money choices. I wanted to talk about money today because it's just been up for a lot of people. I think this time of year, money is up in a way that it isn't necessarily other times of the year, except maybe in April, tax time. This time of year, people are wrapping up their finances, trying to get things in order for the coming year. They're buying gifts. They're, I think, tending to look at money in a different way. I had 3 or 4 clients this week just dealing with money stuff and trying to get books in order and such. And there's so much anxiety around money that people experience, and so much it's such a loaded conversation, issues around self-worth. And in our culture, we're so oriented to valuing ourselves and others based on money and income, and it's craziness. And this is probably one of the most, if not the most, consumer focused time of the year, with Christmas and all the gift giving and the expectations that are around that, and the judgments, and the it's just a lot of craziness. So when we look at things, we often pay, when something is a small expenditure, we will just pay for it without assessing value, without looking at whether this thing is aligned with our values. I guess this is true on all kinds of levels. So one of the things that's bringing this up also for me is it's a time when I'm opening up enrollment for my coaching program. So it's interesting that regardless of where somebody is in their financial life, for the most part, I think there's been maybe one or two clients out of the many, many, many that I have had who didn't have a money conversation come up when we talked about the fee. And it didn't matter what the fee was. Whatever the fee was, the people would say, well, I have to see if I can afford it. And I get that. I totally get that. And the thing is, when we look to see if we can afford something, how are we evaluating that? If you have an opportunity that means that you're going to have to pinch here or there or realign some expenses, but it's going to be absolutely life altering. The question that I come up with is, how can you afford not to? You know, when you have this opportunity to be healing aspects of your life that are going to bubble out into your family, your business, your sense of self and self-worth and being, how can you afford not to take advantage of that? And I'm not just talking about my service, but it's just an example. You know, there are things in life where we're faced with those kinds of options. So there was another example that I can pull from my own life. I told you I'm doing this painting with wax. And it, you know, when you melt stuff, there are some fumes and you want not to have to breathe that. And so it was an expense to get a fan to be able to get rid of those fumes. And really what it came down to is, if I was going to do this, how could I afford not to absorb that expense? It was more money than I wanted to spend. But if I were going to do this, is my health worth more than that expense? You know, so the value that it was creating for me was health and being able to do this thing in a way that took care of me, or risk my health because I didn't want to spend the money. It's not that I didn't have it or that I couldn't figure out how to afford it. It's that I didn't want to spend that money. But the value was greater, truly, and in alignment with my own values, was more important than the money in the account, staying in the account. An example, and I'm not advocating for frivolous spending. I've been there, believe me. But I'm talking about our relationship with money as something that is there to serve us in our higher values, ultimately. Oh, I mean, in its ideal form, right? Obviously, the basis, and Rosalind says, conversely, if it's free, one doesn't feel as invested. And that's often the case. That's often the case. If something's free, we don't think it has value. How crazy is that, right? Um, and if we have to work for it, then maybe we value it more. Um, it's so interesting, all these dynamics. I've been talking with clients about money, and actually have had some work time that we've scheduled where we get together and everybody works on their own finances. And I see that there's a lot of demand for that because we're so avoidant when it comes to money and finance, and there's so much packed in around all of that shame and embarrassment and self-loathing and self-judgment and all kinds of craziness, so much avoidance and fear and anxiety. It's just crazy that we allow money to rule our lives in the way that we do. And the fact is, it's just a construct. It's something that we've created, and now it rules us. And people do awful things in the name of money. You know, people kill people in the name of money and subjugate people, enslave people, torture people, do horrible things, destroy the planet in the name of money. And so I just I had recommended the book The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist to one of my clients, and they said that they wanted to be able to move through that book together. So I started reading it again last night, and it just brought to the fore all these dynamics around money that we just buy into, literally and figuratively, that we buy into without conscious awareness, without consciously choosing. And by the way, if y'all are wanting to participate in this conversation, please go to the Enlightened World Network Facebook page or YouTube channel. You can put comments in on those pages, and I will be able to see your comments. And when I see them, I will respond to them, and we can be engaged together in conversation. So I just find this whole thing about money so fascinating. And we attach our self-worth to it. We attach the worth of others to it. You know, we create identities around it, like a minimum wage earner, a millionaire, a billionaire. And we think that financial status or financial worth, you know, our net worth equates to our worth as human beings, which is really kind of a heinous thought. To think that somebody that has more money is more valuable as a human, you know, that their life is actually more meaningful. It's really twisted. And so let's have a look at value and bringing values to our finances. What does it look like to bring value versus cost? So you know, we might, it's interesting to me where you could go out to dinner and spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars. That's not me, especially, but you know, like there are bottles of wine that are hundreds of dollars, or buy a shirt. I was talking to somebody who was talking about a shirt that was $1,200, and I don't know. I find it hard to imagine that I would ever be in a place in my life, no matter how much money I had, that I would go to spend $1,200 on a shirt, because I personally could see that $1,200 could plant who knows how many trees, or could help so many people in a village, or could feed so many people, or make such a difference. And a shirt, I can't even fathom it. I can't fathom it. I can't fathom the value, like where, I guess I'm not a designer clothing person. So like that is again a construct that many of us just buy into without really thinking so much. Like, here, this thing, because it's a designer piece of clothing, or a bag, or shoes, or because it has a designer name, that somehow it has greater value. It's an arbitrary value in terms of functionality. How is it more functional? It's a symbol of status, right? It's a symbol, an advertisement saying, I have money. And it's something that is identifying me as one of these high worth individuals, meaning I have a bunch of money. And so what does that mean? Does that mean I have greater moral character? Does that mean I'm a greater contribution to society? What does it mean that I have more money? And I think that these are really important questions for us to be looking at. So Rosalind says, from the perspective of what would someone pay, is that what some companies base their charge or cost? I know that there are all kinds of companies that do studies to look at what an optimal price point is. It's ironic and fascinating, and also twisted to know that when you charge more for something, most people tend to think it's worth more. Like a designer piece of clothing, people tend to think it's worth more because it's more expensive. And if it's not very expensive, then we don't treat it as well. Instead of thinking, wow, I got such a great value in this. It's fascinating to me how some people will not have something that's used. They want everything that they buy to be new. These are cultivated values. These are values that we have been conditioned to and trained into, to be good little consumers. Truly. Rosalind says, in medication, I asked the pharmacist for the generic label. It was a big difference, and without health insurance, it's crazy high, 100%. So the thing is that the generic pharmaceuticals, they're not always identical, and there are times when a name brand actually performs better, but usually the generic can perform just as well. It doesn't have the labeling fee. Lots of these companies that are putting things out white label them for other companies. So for instance, I just bought some reflexology tape because I had an injury, which, by the way, this reflexology tape is kind of miracle stuff for pulled muscles and whatnot. Anyway, There was the name brand, and then there was the CVS brand. It's the same thing. It's just labeled. It's just white labeled for CVS. So it was a lesser price. Do I need to pay the price or buy the one that is the name brand? Why? Again, we can look at this sort of thing as status. And it's interesting, the whole notion of status, when we look at value, when we look at cost, what are we buying? We're buying a name. Why? Status. What is that all about? Good morning, Jenny. Welcome. Great to have you here with us this morning. We're talking about value versus cost, and how we have this very skewed notion of value. Like there's status in having a designer label. Now, it's interesting. I like to go shopping at thrift stores because I find more variety. I find unusual things, and I also find what I consider good value. And sometimes there are designer clothes that I like that I won't buy something because of a label. And half the times I don't even know who the designer is if it's got a designer label. But if it's something that I really like, then, and now it's affordable, that's a whole different story. And, that is a good value to me. So I wonder how things might be different if we made our purchases based on value rather than cost. So if I'm going to buy something that lasts for one use, and because it costs me only a couple dollars, versus buying something that is a higher quality that I can use forever that costs more, then it's worth it to me to buy the thing that costs more because it's a better value in the long run, rather than something that I buy and throw away. So Jenny says, my sister's addicted to thrift store shopping. Thrift store shopping's great, but the thing is, it's easy to get caught up in buying stuff because it's inexpensive, right? Like just buying more stuff than you want or need, because, oh, well, and I've done that too, this is really pretty and that's really pretty and I want all this stuff and I can afford it. It's really inexpensive. So I come home with all this stuff. And then what? I've got all this stuff. Now I'm starting to clear out stuff, but it is a treasure hunt. It is a treasure hunt, Jenny, and that's the fun thing about thrift store shopping. I have found such incredible treasures and so many beautiful things that I really, truly, deeply enjoy. Jenny says there's a difference between value and quality. Exactly. Well, to me, quality is part of assessing value, right? If something is a good value, it's also typically a good quality, or it fulfills a purpose. So sometimes it's a better value to buy something more expensive than something that is garbage, that isn't going to last, that is inexpensive. Just because it's inexpensive doesn't mean it's a good value. Just because it's expensive doesn't mean it's a good value. So it's interesting. I wonder what would be different if we drove our decision-making based more on values than just on dollars and cents, is what I'm saying. So Jenny says, find a treasure that wasn't useful or valuable to another. What do they say? One person's trash is another person's treasure, for sure. And I love beautiful things. So I have experienced that the thrift store is a wonderful treasure hunt. And I just get such delight in that, to find something beautiful that is a really good value, and that is something that I can just really enjoy. So Rosalind says, yes. Rosalind says, I joined a buy and sell nothing group. People can gift stuff, ask or get. I've looked at those groups online. That's very cool. I haven't gotten engaged with them yet, but I love that. That's awesome. So Jenny says, yeah, an example between a Toyota and a Hyundai. Hyundai used to be just cheap. But their value has increased quite a lot. So in terms of value, I don't know how they compare anymore. That I really don't know. But are we buying based on status? Are we buying based on value? So Jenny says Hyundai's still cheap. And when I say cheap, I mean poor quality, but I think Hyundai's quality has improved dramatically from what I understand, but I don't know if that's true. Anyway, it's very fascinating to me that when we evaluate things and the way that we're going to spend our money, do we spend for status? And that, you know what? You might be in a place in the world where that status is worth it for you. The status provides value. That's not my orientation, and I'm not the one to be, I'm not dictating things to people, but it just seems to me that our values, when it comes to money, when it comes to the things we buy and the things that we put our energy to, that we're really lost, just really lost in so many ways. Rosalind says, Hyundai is still great. Their warranty can't be beat, and they stand behind it, and quality has increased. That was my understanding too, Rosalind. So, that looks like a great value to me. When you can have good quality and a reasonable price and good service, all of that is part of value in my book. What can I say? Anyway, I just encourage everybody to put value in the equation when making purchases. And it may be that something that is really expensive or seems really expensive is worth the value. Like the value of it is so much greater than the price, that if there's a way to find a way to afford it, that it's worthwhile. So Rosalind says, I know someone who just got one. It's a hybrid, gets 40 miles a gallon. That's awesome. Jenny said, no, I didn't like my Hyundai rental that was stolen. Well, so we've been talking about Hyundais. I've got a boogie. So I just want to say, I love you. I appreciate you. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. Please check out the other awesome, did I say at 9 a.m. Eastern? I think I did. Please check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, EWN One with the Earth, Enlightened World Living. And until next time, so much love to you.